Hello, kindergarten cougars. So today we're going to continue looking at paper. And remember the envelope that had all the papers in it? I want you to take it out. I put mine on the table, and I want you to get another little cup of water and your eyedropper or your medicine dropper. Now, if you lost your medicine dropper or your eyedropper, don't worry. You could get a spoon. I have a plastic spoon. Ooh, I don't like plastic. But you could use a little plastic spoon and just do a little drip of water. So don't worry if you can't find your eyedropper. Last week, we looked at how we can draw on paper and write on paper. And we started thinking about some of the properties of paper that made it really good for writing on. But not all of the paper was good for writing on. So today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna see what happens when we put a drop of water on paper. So, remember how we use the dropper? So we squeeze the top, squeeze it, dip it into the water, let go, and then we have water up in the dropper. I have all of my paper displayed on the table, and I'm going to take my dropper that I have some water in it, and I'm going to put a drop on each paper. This is the cardboard. Actually, is this the cardboard? Yeah, this is like the tag board that's kind of like a cereal box. One drop. Ooh, what's happening to it? Ooh, it is. Looks like it's soaking in and spreading out. Oh, look at that! I'm gonna put another drop. Boys and girls, you can do this along with me. So first it beads up, and then it's soaking in. Oh, I see it's soaking out into the paper, and it's soaked right in. That's interesting. So boys and girls, I want you now to add a drop of water onto all of the other papers. And you are going to observe what happens. All right? All right, I did all of mine, and I want to go back. This one, the cardboard is still a bead of water. The wax paper is really interesting because it doesn't matter how much water I put onto it, it always is a big bead. And if I take my thing and I can actually move the water around, isn't that cool? The paper, the water just soaks right in and makes the paper wet. The construction paper took a little bit longer, but it got wet just the same. And then, boys and girls, this is the toilet paper. Wow, it really soaks up. And this is the paper towel. It really soaks up the water. Do you remember when we put the wood in the water? Sometimes the wood would float, and if we added more weight, the wood would sink. So I'm going to see what happens when we put paper in the water. So when we put water on the paper, some of the water absorbed or soaked up the paper, and the water and the paper got wet. Some of the paper did not soak up the water. The water made a bead, and the paper never got wet. So now I'm going to see what happens when we put the paper in the water. Okay, here's the water. Now I'm going to put in a piece of cardboard. This is the cardboard that's white on one side and brown on the other. So I'm going to put the white side down. So right now it looks like the cardboard is floating, right? It's floating. It's not sinking. I'm gonna push it under the water. I want to see, does it stay under the water or does it float back up? Oh, it's floating back up. I'm going to try again. It's floating. That kind of makes sense because paper is made from wood. And what did the wood do? The wood floats. Okay, so this cardboard is floating in the water. Ooh, it looks like it's starting to sink a little bit over here. Okay, so my cardboard got really wet. Ooh, look at this side. I can see the lines of the cardboard really well. Okay, now I'm gonna try the chipboard. The one that's kind of a thin piece of cardboard, I'm gonna put it in the water. All right. It's floating. It's getting really dark. I'm gonna get all the way in the water. Ooh. Oh, I see some bubbles coming off of mine. Boys and girls, this cardboard is sinking, right? Okay, here we go. I'm gonna try the toilet paper tissue. Whoops, I'm gonna take this one out first. Oh, it's really, really wet and dark. Okay, here's the toilet paper. The toilet paper is kind of, it started to float and now it is starting to sink. And look, boys and girls, the marker that was on the toilet paper is going into the water and making my water kind of blue. All right, and the toilet paper kind of seems to be coming apart. There you go, there's the toilet paper. All right, next, let's try the pink construction paper. At first it floats, and once it gets soaking wet, it sinks. All right, Cougars, please get out your science notebook and you're going to turn to the page that says, what happens when water gets on paper? What happens when water gets on paper? That's our focus question. Make sure you put your name on your paper and you put the date that you're doing this lesson. Now, what happens when water gets on paper? Well, different things happened, didn't they? So you don't have to write two things. You can write just one. I wrote two things. And the first one I talked about was what happened when the wax paper got water on it. And does anybody remember what happened when the water was on the wax paper? What did we see? We saw a bead of water. So I wrote water beads. Then I also wrote a second thing. You can write one if you want, but I noticed that there were two different things that were happening. Sometimes the water would bead and sometimes the water would soak in. So the second one, I talked about the construction paper and how the water soaks in and makes the paper wet. Paper gets wet. So I wrote both of those things on my paper. You only have to do one, you don't have to do two, but if you do two, that's really doing more, showing me that you're working towards a 4 in science. All right, next week we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to do something with paper mache. See you next week, Cougars.